But the real turning point in Austen's relationship with her Victorian readers came in 1870, when Jane's nephew, James Edward Austen Leigh, took it upon himself to present an authorised account of her life. I went to meet Professor Catherine Sutherland at the modest Hampshire cottage where Austen lived with her mother and sister. So who is the Jane Austen, then, that emerges from this first biography?
Well, a surprisingly intimate picture of Jane Austen emerges. How she parcelled out her time, how she was the one in the family who prepared breakfast at 9 in the morning. She was also responsible for keeping an eye on the quantities of tea that they had and topping it up. How she wrote in this room, sitting at her desk over there, and how, and this is where, of course, mythology perhaps begins to enter the story, how she was alerted to any unwelcome intruder on her writing activities by the creaking of this door as it opened, so she could hide away her manuscripts.
I have to say that is one of the most annoying anecdotes in the whole of the history of literary women, this idea of like, oh, the creaking door, and then, oh, I'll hide away because I'm a modest little woman. Yes. She's described really in a way that fits, I think, yes, Victorian ideals of femininity, like some sort of little wren or sparrow, you know, and not seeking the glare of publicity. And I don't know, it doesn't fit really with all the sense of the kind of intellectual brio that you find in the novels.
No, I think it doesn't fit at all. But undoubtedly, it does give us a myth, and a myth that remained powerful for an extremely long time.
So presumably there's not very much about the secret private life of the bedroom in the Austen Leigh biography.
No, I think we'd be hard-pushed to find secret private life of the bedroom in any of Jane Austen's biographies. That's a challenge for a biographer, isn't it? But actually, as the way this room is now presented as part of the museum and the shrine to Jane, there are elements of the Austen Leigh myth in here. For instance, he had the dilemma of a portrait. People want to see what Jane Austen looked like. All he had to work with was this cartoon drawing by Cassandra, sometime 1810-11. Rather sardonic image.
Yes, quite sort of mean little face, really.
A mean little face, indeed. And the family argued over what they should do. And they decided they would give it a makeover. And so a portrait was commissioned from that to soften its features. And interestingly, there was quite a debate in the family as to whether it looked like Jane. And they all agreed it had a kind of look of her, but they wouldn't really recognise her from it. But on the other hand, it was a pleasant face.
Pleasant, but much less intelligent looking.
Less intelligent.
Bit dopey.
Homely, yes. More confined within a domestic image. Yes. And this became the frontispiece of the first edition of the biography.
So this is Dear St. Jane of Chawton.
Exactly. This is the Jane Austen of myth.
As the end of the century approached, an ardent army of Jane Austen fans was swelling in numbers. Then and now, the spiritual home for these enthusiasts was and remains the Georgian resort city of Bath. Today, the highlight of Bath's annual Jane Austen Festival is a dashing Regency parade, a carnival of muslins and millinery, bonnets and breeches. And it's not just the ladies who have a weakness for buckskin. Are you the haberdasher?
Well, I madam, I'm the haberdasher's assistant. It is my wife's business, madam.
So you sell all this stuff. How do you account for everybody wanting to dress up so much?
Well, I mean, that is a short question and a big answer. If you accept that the 60 years of George III's reign were probably the greatest epoch in British history, and the Regency is the cream on the top of the cake, and so it attracts so many people.
Did you make your own costumes, or did you buy them?
This is my own, and this is a naval surgeon 1806.
Oh, is it?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Do you think that's what a lot of the appeal then is, actually seeing the clothes, the costumes, the carriages, the chandeliers?
Yeah, it's that age of elegance that's gone, I think. And a lot of people look for it. A lot of people are wishing they were back to that standard of elegance.
100 years ago, there was a rather more serious male interest in her books. A sophisticated and highbrow clique of academics and aesthetes who called themselves the Janeites. For Janeites, like Sir George Saintsbury, the proper appreciation of Austen's literature was an exclusive and reverential pursuit.
With Miss Austen, the myriad, trivial, unforced strokes build up the picture like magic. Nothing is false. Nothing is superfluous.
Katie Halsey is the author of a new book on Jane Austen's readers, and I met up with her in Bath to find out who these Janeites actually were.
They're a sort of cosy elite of Oxford dons, the literati, who are all really interested in Jane Austen.
They do seem quite precious to me. The Janeites say things like, oh, I'd like to marry Elizabeth Bennet and spend my life with her. It's quite an odd thing to say about a heroine.
Yeah, it is. But then that whole thing about wanting to be a part of Jane Austen's life is very much part of what the Janeites are all about too. So they're interested in falling in love with her characters, knowing more about her characters, being part of a world, I suppose, that Jane Austen has created.
So what was it that the Janeites found in the books? Is it the characters, the style, the laughter? Is it the wit? Is it the architecture?
I think it's probably all of those things and more. I mean, I think one of the things they did find was an idea of an England that had gone, a secure world, a world that has rules, however much those rules may actually be subverted and undercut in the novels. So I think people saw that stability in her.
I think it's good to know that there are all these sort of male supporters of Jane Austen throughout history, because somehow the fact that she is now seen as such a kind of female author with a female readership has somehow undermined her status.
Yes, and I think it's important for people to know that Winston Churchill, for example, read Jane Austen in the middle of the war, and he said that she cured him. Antibiotics and Jane Austen made me better from a fever, he says.
Another loyal Janeite was the writer Rudyard Kipling. During the First World War, the Kiplings lost their only son in battle. Rudyard assuaged their grief reading Austen aloud to his wife and daughter. He even went on to write a short story called The Janeites, set in the battlefields of the Western Front. This is the Menin Gate in Ypres, the town the Tommies called Wipers. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers from across the British Empire marched out into the trenches through this gate. In an act of commemoration, a ceremony of remembrance takes place here every single day of the year. Trench warfare was a soul-destroying mix of intermittent terror and numbing monotony.
The December 1915 edition of The War Illustrated reported, "We were caught unprepared by the clamour for books that rose from the trenches almost as soon as they were dug. No matter what officer or man was asked if there was anything he wanted, the answer was always the same: cigarettes and something to read." But what sort of books did the soldiers demand? What he does not want is fiction about war. He likes tales of strong domestic interest, and it is worth noting that Jane Austen has taken her fragrant way into a surprising number of dugouts.
Among papers donated to the Imperial War Museum, there is a private memoir by an officer, a teacher from Glasgow by the name of William Boyd Henderson.
Often and often during a long route march or a cold, dirty job, a lorry or caterpillar, I've been kept in my spirits by the thought of the book in my kit bag waiting for me. With what eagerness I have opened it and been transported immediately from the world of sergeant majors, bayonet fighting and trench digging and lorry cleaning and caterpillar greasing to a new world created for me by my adored Jane Austen.
I see myself lying full length on the grass as I finish a chapter of Emma. Till now that she was threatened with its loss, Emma had never known how much of her happiness depended on being first with Mr. Knightley, first in interest and affection. Satisfied that it was so, and feeling it her due, she had enjoyed it without reflection, and only in the dread of being supplanted, found how inexpressibly important it had been. Face to face with industrialised military slaughter, soldiers could look away into Austen's world and be consoled. In 1917, an intelligence officer, Reginald Farrar, managed to find time to mark the centenary of Jane Austen's death with a critical essay which redefined her achievement. Farrar wrote, "Talk of her limitations is vain. It must never be thought that limitation of scene implies limitation of human emotion. Jane Austen's heroes and heroines and subject matter are, in fact, universal human nature." He kills off stone dead the idea of twee, spinsterish Jane and says really she lives only in the novels where she is a genius on a par with Shakespeare, important forever for the brilliance of her realism. So at last, 100 years after her death, she's finally made it as a national author.